After the final Brexit 3 months ago, the Big Bang did not materialize, but the damage to the British economy is enormous. And yet hardly anyone talks about it on the island. But why not? You don't hear much about Brexit in Great Britain anymore, which is astonishing 3 months after the biggest turning point in British post-war history. Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his ministers themselves have tried to use the word as rarely as possible since January. In the budget speech by Finance Minister Rishi Sunak, the word appeared exactly once. In the 111-page growth plan, published at the same time, there were only a few platitudes about it at the end. That's it. Brexit appears to be over. That was what Johnson had promised the British in the last election, and the majority of the media, as exhausted by Brexit as the people, are following the strategy. The reality, however, is different. In the slipstream of the pandemic, the Brexit damage to the British economy is increasing continuously. Damage that is likely to continue for a long time, even if the pandemic is defeated. The last-minute deal on Christmas Eve prevented direct tariffs, but the new, not so new bureaucratic hurdles for trade are still big. Exports to the European Union fell by 40% in January alone, and small and medium-sized businesses are particularly hard hit when they export food. Ironically, the hardest hit was the fishermen, who had voted for Brexit by a big majority. In some areas, they are recording a minus of more than 80%. The export of crustaceans and shellfish has almost completely come to a standstill. The ministers in London who initially wanted to dismiss this development as teething troubles or corona consequences have now fallen silent. Even the OBR government's independent audit office estimates that the UK's total gross national product will fall by up to 4% in the medium term. Now, one could say that Great Britain has already weathered completely different crises, not least the massive economic crisis that hit the island since the late 1970s under Margaret Thatcher. And that's why the kingdom will survive the negative consequences of Brexit, they will say. But Thatcher had a plan for how to get her country out of its dire situation. Johnson does not have such a plan, because the most astonishing thing about the current situation is not that anybody or nobody on the island wants to talk about Brexit and its consequences anymore. The most amazing thing is that Johnson cannot explain to anyone what these sacrifices were actually necessary for. The much heralded trade deal with the USA is a long way off. Comparable deals with India and other former colonial areas are not very realistic in the medium term. The mantra of a new global Britain has so far remained an empty phrase. Instead, the EU continues to be stylized as an opponent and scapegoat in the tried and tested way, as if Brexit had never happened. There is a reason for all of this, and it depends on the deal Johnson presented to the British as a Christmas gift on Christmas Eve. This deal allows a real deviation of the British from EU standards in the vast majority of cases, but only under threat of punitive tariffs or trade restrictions. At the same time, a surprising number of areas have to be renegotiated. So Brexit is far from over. It was not a liberation, but is becoming a permanent condition. In addition, the sovereignty so much invoked by London, that means the deviation from EU standards, is practically worthless as far as possible. Worse worker protection and lower food standards are currently not very popular in the UK. More state aid for private companies after Corona is hardly possible and any way controversial among conservatives. And so the exemplary organized vaccination program is currently serving as a great first success for Brexit. The mismanagement of the EU countries on the continent makes it all too easy for the British government. Because the decision to go it alone nationally had nothing to do with Brexit. You always could have done that. Johnson hit it when the island was still a member of the EU, and only after the UK had more deaths than any other European country. In the current euphoria about an imminent end to the pandemic on the island, this is currently going under. In the end, however, this vaccination success should prove to be a double-edged sword for the Johnson government. Because in the end, he is unlikely to be of much use to Johnson if after the pandemic his focus is again on the fundamental problems in the country. Then it should no longer be so easy for him to keep silent about the Brexit damage. And then it should soon turn out that Johnson's biggest deception was the promise itself, with which he won so many voters in December 2019. Get Brexit done. Yeah, that he would do Brexit. But Brexit is not done. He has so far only brought the British disadvantages. And if you look closely, it's not even a Brexit, so a clear cut or break with the neighbours. On the contrary, ongoing negotiations with the EU have only just begun. No wonder Johnson rarely likes to talk about it anymore. And silence is just another deception, I have to say. Another one of those deceptions we hear since 2015. The lies have never stopped, and this silence is just another form of it. Because whatever was promised before the referendum has not come true. Of course, the fact that they can deviate from the standards, okay, but it's of no use. And everything else is not benefits. Everything we see now at the moment is covered up by the pandemic. Yeah, sure, because you can't really single out the numbers for the Brexit damage from the corona damage. And that makes it easy for the Johnson government to cover everything under corona. But when the corona pandemic will be over, the real damage of Brexit will surface. A lot of people see it in everyday life now, even if they want to understand it or not. It's not corona, that was Brexit. And those effects, those consequences, driving licenses, children, what I made videos about from other, from parents from EU countries, football, e-commerce, food imports, rules of origin, all these points we see now. But in the end, we will see an even clearer picture that's visible to anyone, not only people really looking into the facts, looking into the agreements, that will see what all this really means. Not to talk about the financial services, that will be fun in the mid of 2022 when it really hits. There's still a transition period. There are transition periods for other things. We will see it when finally there will be checks in the UK for imports from the EU, which are not happening now. And so all this deceit will be discovered when Corona is over and when everything is running as normal, because that is the new normal for our relationship. Once again, there are no new rules. Those rules are in place for a long time, and the British helped make these rules in the WTO and the EU. But they are just new for the new third country, United Kingdom, or in this case, Great Britain, because Northern Ireland is a special case here. But someday, even the most stubborn people will discover what Brexit really means. And that day will be interesting. But until then, there will happen a lot. There also, in a little bit more than a month, there will be the Scottish elections, which will be another step in the whole process, where we will see what consequences will be there. And the consequences will be there for a very long time. The discovery of not new consequences, but when they hit people personally, that will continue for quite some time. Negotiations, because of Brexit, between the EU and the UK will go on for quite some time. And so channels like mine and many others will be there for quite a long time, because it's like a little bit of one of my childhood favorite movies, A Never-Ending Story. Every time I mention this, I wish I could put Lee Marl's Never-Ending Story, the song from the movie, in here. But I get a copyright problem with that, so I won't do that. But it was a great song when I was a kid. If you have a look, it's from Lee Marl. People from the UK should recognize that name. So it will be around for a long time. That's what I wanted to say with this. And if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel. Auf Wiedersehen.